Vince was already quite old. He was walking in the garden when suddenly his eyes fell on a girl whose beauty drove him crazy from within. He began thinking about how to get her. It felt as if Vince's sleep had disappeared because of that girl, Sophie. When his wife asked him what was wrong, he lied to his wife, Miriam, but Sophie remained firmly in his mind. Now, who was Sophie to him, and how would he meet her? Let's see in the movie. As the movie opens, it begins with a large house. There was a lot of hustle and bustle because a wedding was taking place that day. The house was full of life. Some people were chatting, while others were eating heartily. The wedding was between Sophie and Johnny. Sophie was the daughter of this big house, while Johnny was becoming the son-in-law. After the wedding rituals were completed, Johnny and Sophie come into a room and start enjoying each other's company. The guests were still downstairs, fully enjoying the wedding celebration. Sophie's stepfather's name was Vince, and her mother's name was Miriam. Miriam's husband had died a year earlier, after which she married Vince. The big house belonged to Miriam. She was very wealthy, which is why Vince lived with her. After some time, Sophie and Johnny come out of the room and appear in front of everyone. In this city, it was a custom that after the wedding, the bride and groom would first spend time getting to know each other properly, and only then would the groom take the bride to his own home. Sophie and Johnny followed this tradition, so Johnny now took her to his house. After they left, all the guests also went home. After a while, night fell, and now only Vince and his wife Miriam were left in the house. Vince started walking toward the bathroom, but stopped in front of Sophie's room. Sophie's clothes were lying there, and Vince began looking at them. He realized that his daughter's clothes had been torn by Johnny. On the other hand, Miriam was instructing the servants about their work. As Vince kept looking at Sophie's clothes, a storm of feelings for her rose in his heart. But even then, he secretly desired her. Just then, Miriam came near him, and Vince made an excuse and hid the clothes. Miriam kept talking for a while. Then, seeing Sophie's clothes, she became happy because she understood that her daughter had pleased her son-in-law. She started dancing with joy after seeing her daughter's clothes, while Vince went off to sleep. The next morning, when Vince came out onto his balcony, he noticed a girl in the swimming pool. Vince was quite far away, so he couldn't recognize her. He went to Miriam and asked about the new girl. Miriam told him that the girl was Sophie's younger cousin and that she had arrived there just the previous night after completing her studies. Miriam further explained that the girl's name was Nenah and that she was staying in their old guest house. Hearing this, Vince felt very happy inside. After some time, Vince got ready to go to the office. Before leaving, he wanted to meet Nenah once, so he went near the guest house. He didn't find Nenah there, so Vince went to his office. But even at the office, his mind wasn't focused on work. He kept thinking about Sophie, because of which he was wandering around holding Sophie's clothes. When he couldn't control himself anymore, he left his office work and returned to the guest house to see Nenah. At that moment, Nenah was cleaning. Seeing her beauty, Vince forgot Sophie and began desiring Nenah instead. But because he was quite old, he quietly started to leave. Just then, Nenah saw him, stopped him, opened the door, and asked him to come inside. Nenah knew that Miriam had married Vince as her second husband. Nenah was a young girl. She had never loved any man before, so she was looking for a boyfriend to experience love. She started talking to Vince in a flirtatious manner and began making suggestive gestures. Although Vince was completely captivated by Nenah's beauty, he was also afraid that his wife might come there. Making an excuse, Vince said he had to leave. Nenah tried to stop him, but Vince used work at the office as an excuse and left. On the other side, Miriam's manager, Norman, came to visit her. From time to time, Norman would come to Miriam to go over the financial accounts. Vince was no longer showing much love toward Miriam, so Miriam also wanted another man in her life, and Norman seemed like the right choice. She was laughing and talking with Norman in such a way that it felt as if she had become crazy about him. Meanwhile, after meeting Nenah, when Vince returned home, he found Miriam and Norman laughing together. Vince asked Norman what he was doing there. Norman replied that he had come to discuss the accounts. After that, Vince went back to the balcony, where he saw Nenah bathing. At the same time, Norman and Miriam were busy talking romantically. Norman was afraid because if Vince found out the truth, he would be fired from his job. After a while, Norman calmly convinced Miriam and sent her away. On the other hand, Vince was talking to his manager, but his mind wasn't focused. Suddenly, as Vince was leaving, something fell out of his pocket. His manager picked it up. The manager made fun of him a lot. Vince then cleverly lied and said the clothes belonged to his wife. After that, he quickly left in his car. Once again, Vince went to Nenah Nenah's place. He didn't see Nenah. Just then, Nenah arrived. She told Vince that he could do whatever he wanted with her. Saying this, she opened a safe for Vince, after which Vince stole her treasure. At night, Vince and Nenah were at Miriam's house. Nenah was insulting Vince because he wasn't listening to her. She advised him to go to a royal physician. After hearing this, Vince got angry and went to his room. The next day, Sophie returned to visit her mother, and her husband Johnny was with her. After the wedding, this was their first visit to Miriam's house. As soon as they arrived, they received a warm welcome. Johnny and Sophie were also going to stay in the guest house, which Nenah had already cleaned. Sophie really liked the guest house. She wanted to stay there so she could be close to Johnny freely without Miriam hearing them. But when they found out that Nenah was also living in the guest house, both of them became upset. Johnny got extremely angry, but Sophie explained to him that they shouldn't worry about Nenah. After Sophie calmed him down, Johnny came back to her. Then Nenah came into their room and said that she wanted to sleep with both of them because she was scared to sleep alone in the other room. Hearing this, Johnny felt so angry that he wanted to shoot Nenah, but he couldn't do that. The next day, Johnny was taking Nenah to the city. Nenah needed to buy some things, so they were heading into town. On the way, Nenah tried to seduce Johnny, but it had no effect on him. Nenah had ruined his night, so he was extremely angry with her. Soon, they reached the city. Nenah went into a shop to buy some items. Johnny waited there for a while, and then Nenah returned with the shopping. After that, both of them head back toward the house. Nenah starts teasing Johnny again, but Johnny doesn't say anything to her. A short while later, they arrive home. Overcome with anger, Johnny grabs Nenah. Nenah just pretends that she's upset with Johnny. Meanwhile, the people in the house are unaware of all this. Vince, Miriam, Sophie, and a priest have arrived, and everyone is discussing Nenah's possible marriage. A little later, Nenah and Johnny also arrive after finishing their business. Johnny tells everyone that he enjoyed going around the city with Nenah, and Nenah also seems happy with Johnny's words. The next morning, Sophie and Vince are getting ready to go to the market. Vince's eyes remain fixed on her. A feeling of love for Sophie rises again in Vince's heart. Soon, both of them drive off. Back at the house, Johnny finds himself alone in the room with Miriam and starts flirting with her. First, Johnny talks to Miriam and then begins playing games with her. Johnny thinks that today he won't enjoy himself with his wife, but with Miriam instead. However, every move he makes fails. Feeling disappointed, he looks toward the window and sees Nenah there. Johnny realizes that if he doesn't meet Nenah at that moment, his desire will remain unfulfilled. So he steps outside and starts looking for her. After a short while, he spots Nenah and starts chasing her, but Nenah runs away. He doesn't find Nenah, but instead, he runs into Sophie. Soon after, everyone is at the church where the priest is speaking to the people. He says that today's humans are filled with lust and that people can do anything to satisfy their desires, even form relationships with anyone. He says humans must learn to control themselves. After this, he calls Miriam forward. Miriam is very religious, and she also speaks about lust, telling people that she stays far away from such things and that all of this is just illusion. She says only those who stay away from such desires can truly find God. After meeting the priest, Miriam is later seen at home with Norman. In the eyes of society, Miriam appears very religious, but only people like Norman know her true nature. At that time, no one else was in the house. Seeing the opportunity, Miriam says something to Norman that makes him tense. Norman starts sweating. Miriam signals him to come closer, but Norman is afraid because Nenah is in the next room. Miriam moves closer to seduce him, making one gesture after another, but Norman doesn't have the courage. That day, Miriam wanted something from Norman, so she gestures toward the room and walks away. Norman doesn't want to follow her, but a short while later, Vince arrives, and Norman is saved from Miriam's trap. Norman thanks Vince, but Vince doesn't understand why he's being thanked and starts laughing. Norman then tells him that Miriam has called him to the upstairs room. After some time, Vince reaches Miriam's room, where Miriam loses her temper because she needed Norman's help, not Vince's. Vince's arrival causes Miriam great frustration, and she starts scolding him harshly. An argument breaks out between them. On the other side, Sophie brings breakfast for Johnny. It had been many days since Sophie had been close to Johnny, so she wanted to spend time with her husband that day. But Johnny's attention was on Nenah, so he didn't pay any attention to Sophie. When Sophie realizes that Johnny is ignoring her, she becomes disappointed and returns to her room. On the other side, Norman was sitting near the pool while Nenah was bathing in it. Norman felt pleased looking at Nenah's beauty, especially since Nenah also seemed attracted to him. Meanwhile, the church priest arrived at the house. He had come to meet Miriam because she herself had called him. Miriam told the priest that she wanted someone's love. The priest hugged her and tried to comfort her, but Miriam stopped him and said, "I want love at night." Hearing this, the priest was completely shocked. He explained to her that she was a religious woman and should stay away from such desires. Hearing this, Miriam began to cry. Outside, Sophie also started bathing in the pool, and Vince came to the poolside behind her. Norman and Vince were still watching the girls when Johnny also arrived at the pool. On the other side, the priest kept explaining to Miriam that if she formed a relationship with someone, she would become a sinner. But Miriam didn't want to listen to anything the priest said because her heart had already developed feelings for someone. Meanwhile, Johnny and Sophie finished bathing and went to change their clothes. Since Miriam refused to listen, the priest became angry and decided to leave. As the priest moved forward, he saw Norman with Nenah. This made the priest furious. He realized that everyone in this house was sinful. He scolded Norman, calling him a sinner. Hearing this, Norman jumped into the pool and stayed underwater for a long time. The priest panicked and called out for help, thinking someone needed to be saved. Nenah came and rescued Norman. Vince happened to be passing by the same path. When he saw Sophie, he couldn't take his eyes off her. That night, Vince was sleeping with Miriam, but in his imagination, he saw Sophie beside him. Just then, Miriam woke up and tried to get into a romantic mood with Vince. She wanted closeness, but Vince pretended to be asleep and ignored her. Vince's attention was completely on Sophie, which is why he kept neglecting Miriam. The next day, as soon as Vince left for the office, Miriam asked Norman to help her. Miriam had made up her mind that she would go to bed with Norman that day. Norman tried his best to avoid it, but Miriam was not going to let him go. Before long, she grabbed him and took him into a room where they came close to each other. That night, Sophie also couldn't sleep. She wanted to spend the night with Johnny, but Johnny was already asleep. The next day, Sophie was cutting flowers in the garden while Vince secretly watched her. While looking at her, he picked some flowers and gave them to Sophie. After that, they went hunting together. Vince wanted to spend as much time as possible with Sophie, which is why he took her on a hunt. Sophie was also sad because of Johnny, so she felt happy being with Vince. They spent the entire day wandering through the forest. Suddenly, it started raining. While trying to escape the rain, they entered an old house deep in the forest, a place where no one lived. Because of the rain, their clothes were soaked. Vince removed his clothes first, and soon Sophie did the same. When Vince looked at her, he moved closer, and Sophie fully supported him. That night, there was a weekend party at Miriam's house with many family friends attending. Johnny danced closely with Nenah, and Sophie saw them together. Watching their behavior, Sophie realized that Johnny was cheating on her, which was why he had been ignoring her. On the other side, Vince was walking in the garden because he didn't like parties. At that moment, he saw Sophie, and just by looking at her, Vince understood that she needed him. And with this, the story comes to an end. Thank you very much for watching our video.